All right, we are live once again on YouTube on at least in my area, rainy and stormy Thursday morning. So if you hear, thunderstorms and thunderclaps, it's not me playing my intro buffer at the beginning. It's in the background. It's actual wonderful spring weather here in central Oklahoma. And with me is the host of the Trad Dads podcast, Levi. How are you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Oh, it's a good day. It's like another good day here in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And we're sitting here having a chat about going to have a chat about the economy and everything going on right now related to that thing which I cannot name on YouTube because I tried to
Yeah.
make a video about the saint whose name is identical to it and has eerie sort of parallels to the big thing going on out there. And my analytics on my channel went haywire as soon as I uploaded it, and it went fine once I deleted it. So I'll find a way to
Right.
get that to the public on Saturday.
Yeah. I
So
think from what I've heard is happening is like a lot of these tech companies send everybody home, and so they're not doing as much monitoring as they normally do. They're just letting the algorithms do it. And so like Facebook is overshooting and and maybe YouTube too, right? Facebook is overshooting and just squashing everything. So
sort of what I noticed with me is normally every Monday through Friday video I do gets demonetized, and then I submit it for manual review. So I put things up a day or even 2 days ahead of time, and which gives me time also to delete a video before it goes public if I get something really wrong. And what ends up happening lately is that hasn't happened at all. It happened this morning with the video I did today when I made it scheduled to go live at 3:15 a.m. Central Time. It got demonetized, and I submitted it for manual review, and like 5 minutes later, it was fine, which tells me there's probably some overworked guy looking to make sure I'm not using racial slurs and making sure I'm not using the name of the beer bug in a video. Oh, I'm not.
yeah.
Boom. Okay, good.
Right. Yeah. The conditions those people work under are just horrific because, it's just like imagine watching like the most horrible stuff all day long, every day, you know?
I know. No, like there are articles about the
Yeah.
the YouTube censors and like how some of these guys are having in-office psychologists to help them not get radicalized because they're watching some like
Yeah.
really weird videos.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's crazy.
So, again, for those of you joining in with us, we're going to be talking about the economy with the host of the Trad Dads podcast. You can find him on. Well, why don't you tell us where we can find you on
Yeah.
various
Yeah.
platforms?
So the podcast is on the 10 major podcasting platforms. I use Anchor just like Anthony does for his audio. And so Anchor is now owned by Spotify. So Spotify is a great place to get it. But whatever app you have on your phone will work just fine. Just search for Trad Dads. And then I'm also on YouTube. I don't, it's not a video show, and I don't do any visuals like Anthony does. So there's no reason to watch it on YouTube unless that's just where you want to get things. And then if you want to interact with me, if you go to anchor.fm/TRADDADS, Trad Dads, you can actually send me messages. Or I have a Facebook page, a Twitter page, and the Twitter, or I guess not a Twitter page, but I have a Facebook page and I have a Twitter account for the show at Trad Dads. And so yeah, that's how you find me.
Awesome. So, what we want to talk about today is you may have noticed the economy is taking what looks like a nosedive right now, and that there's been a lot of talk from the government about what they're going to do. And, well, like I said, Levi's an economist, and he's a Catholic economist. And as you say at the very beginning of every episode of your podcast, you tend to look at economic and cultural issues from the lens of traditional thought, as I believe how you put it. So,
Yes.
that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look today about what is going on right now and how to address and how do we address things and what to expect from the government, and filtering through a lot of the nonsense out there. And if you hear me use the word nonsense, usually it's usually filler for a word that starts with the word bull. Okay, so like there's a lot of nonsense out there right now. So, for instance, I literally just saw on Twitter that the Spectator is saying that we're in a recession already. So, what do you think about that, Levi? Are we in a recession right now?
Yeah. So this is the thing about economics is that so many things in economics are built for forecasting. Everything, our concepts are built for hindsight, and a recession is defined as 3/4 of negative GDP growth. And so, if let's say the conditions for a recession start on January 1st of a given year, you won't officially know if you have had a recession until January 1st of the following year, because the data lags that much. And so, you would get negative growth in the first quarter, negative growth in the second quarter, and then negative growth in the third quarter. But the third quarter data doesn't show up until the end of the year. So now, could the spectator be misrepresenting what this guy said? Maybe he said that they are, their internal models, are forecasting a recession. Sure. I mean, if you're a huge bank, of course you want to be forecasting all kinds of things that are, sort of macro in nature. And I want to put a caveat in here, that, like I always do, which is that I am not a macro economist, and I am not I'm not an investment guy. Okay. So my career has been exclusively, up until the last 2 years, my career has been exclusively in agricultural economics departments. And so that is my area. I'm a micro guy. I do kind of like business finance kind of stuff, but I'm not a stocks guy. I don't, I know enough to be, I guess, sensible on those things, but that's not my specialty. That's not what my PhD was designed to right. have me specialize in. So, but now with that said, I mean, I understand enough to, at least be conversant with these guys. And so, like I said, I think he's probably forecasting recession, which means, and this is how this kind of thing plays out, is that you have mass layoffs, and those layoffs have secondary effects that filter through everything. And for right now, I would say the retail sector and, the areas of the economy that are built around, people being in a certain place at a certain time, right? Entertainment, retail, et cetera, probably 10% of GDP is what I've seen. And so, you might think, well, if we get a 50% drop in 10% of the economy, that's no big deal. And it's like, well, it is, because the secondary effects of all that unemployment, and especially from my point of view, the concern for small business, right? My comment has been throughout this whole thing is that, globalism begets globalism, right? Because even the crises that it creates sort of embolden it. So maybe I'm getting off onto too many different things, Anthony. So
it's fine.
Slow me down.
There's somebody in the chat asking if you're a Rothbardian or a Keynesian economist.
Yeah. So, well, I guess I should say that's another thing I had quite a bit of experience with before I went to graduate school. I became interested in economics as a business major, basically through reading the Austrian economics stuff. One summer, I think I spent a week and I just read Rothbard's stuff cover to cover, a whole bunch of stuff. And so I definitely understand the Austrian stuff. I have a paper I published on kind of applying Austrian macro to agriculture. And so, I'm conversant with that. I mean, Keynesian, I don't know. Keynes had some, decent insights in some cases, but I think the biggest thing Keynes, Keynes himself was a terrible guy, but
right. Like, I had to do some political economy in my PhD program, and one of the best books I ever read on economic ideas, not like, I wouldn't call it an economics book, but one of the best books that I ever read was a Keynesian book, because the observations I couldn't really disagree with, even if I thought the solutions were off base. And that book was The Affluent Society. I can't remember the name of the author of it.
Right.
But I have it on my shelf somewhere. And if you ever want to go find that book to read it, it's easy for a normal person to read, which is really nice. but you want to find an older edition because that book kept getting reissued and tinkered with all the way through the 80s until when the author died, and it got more radical. And so you want to find like a 50s or 60s edition before the author went off the deep end with it. But yeah, as you were saying, I mean, but you wouldn't. Where would you put your economic views, place today then?
Yeah, I mean, so from from what everybody's interested in, right? The newspaper economics, the macro stuff. I mean, gosh, I mean, I would say that I'm probably I think the Austrians have a lot of good insights, but I think in terms of how things work, I think the Austrian theory of the business cycle can easily be overblown to try to explain everything. So I don't buy that. I don't think everything is a real phenomenon. I don't think every recession is due to the Federal Reserve screwing things up. So I think there's a large possibility that it plays into many, many things and distorts markets, but I don't think it's the only cause. So I wouldn't say that I'm really in a certain camp. I mean, it's like, am I a real business cycle theorist? Am I am I a Friedmanite? Am I a Keynesian? Yeah, I don't know. But I think the thing is with any, and I think this is where sort of the Catholic part comes in, is with any sort of school of thought in economics, there are some fundamental moral assumptions that go into any discussion of these economic issues. And what happens is those moral things creep into the analysis, right? And I think they should, right? But the point is that they're going to anyway. And so you have to get that right before your analysis makes any sense. And so what I would say is that, would I be in favor of some kind of Keynesian solution for something? Maybe if the
tool fits the specific problem.
Right. Well, I mean, if our if there's some kind of moral issue that outweighs the pure focus on material stuff.
Right. So right? I want to, for the audience, I do want to mention that it seems like about 75% of the time you 75% of your podcast, you at least reference Belloc's Economics for Helen at least once, right? And
or Pesh or somebody like that. Yeah, definitely.
Yes. And these are Catholic thinkers of the evil distributism thing.
Yeah, right.
Not socialism. Don't care what anybody says.
Right.
I have a book on my shelf that I bought, and it's more of a pamphlet that annihilates that lie and points out that it was a lie published by somebody in a book filled with lies about Belloc that was actually literally classed as calumny.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I mean, I think anybody who thinks that, distributism or Chesterton is a socialist just needs to look at his debates with George Bernard Shaw.
Right.
It's, the fundamental tenet one of the fundamental tenets of distributism is ownership, right? And literally socialism's, sine qua non is not private ownership of the means of production.
Socialism is everything is done in the name of the people by the elite.
Right, and it's exactly, and it's one of these things where just because distributism recognizes that you're always going to have an elite and that they play an important role doesn't mean, and the government plays an important role, doesn't then mean that they're all socialist, right? I just think the whole thing to me just seems like a smear from the neocon kind of perspective. But
right. So let's get to the subject of today, though, the economy. And so you may have heard in the news that there's these sudden weird turn in our government towards bipartisanship and cooperation. I'm all of a sudden looking for a blood moon and looking for Planet X or whatever to be coming through our system. Like, I almost certain that that's a sign of the end times. Because it was like a switch was flipped by the government where the media all of a sudden, you have MSNBC and CNN hosts praising the president. What happened?
Yeah.
And we have economic proposals being suggested by Republicans that Andrew Yang was sort of at least reminiscent of what he was doing. And so we got a lot of policy proposals coming out. And like the debates now coming out of the government are like almost ideal. Like they're actually debating policy and solutions instead of invectives, name calling, and threats. It's an amazing thing to
Right.
behold. So let's go over some of these things because one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is I saw on Facebook that you were posting about a lot of these things, and so you've been able to pay more attention to it than I have.
Yeah. So, I think the biggest thing that has come out of the last 12 hours has been that the House and the Senate passed what they're calling the second round of kind of stimulus and stuff like that to deal with this. So we had, early on we had the Fed, doing a lot of the things the Fed does, like they were doing some quantitative easing stuff. So that would be QE4, I guess. They were doing a lot of buying of treasuries, and the buying of treasuries and that kind of stuff was designed to pull bank loan rates down. So interbank loan rates. I don't want to go fully into what federal funds rate and all that is, but the point is that sort of the most fundamental rates and the interest rates in the economy were being pulled all the way down to as low as they can possibly get them. And now the Fed is going in and buying mortgage securities and all kinds of other stuff, and again, the whole idea is to keep rates lower, or is to push rates down and to try to, kind of keep the banking sector afloat, essentially, right? Because what happens is that, even if the banks can't, it's like this, the banks work on a spread, right? So they have a cost in terms of an interest rate, and they have a revenue in terms of an interest rate. Mm-hmm. And so if all of a sudden you have a bunch of defaults and you have a bunch of people who, aren't going to take out a loan at a higher interest rate because they can't afford it, right? Because they're cutting back. Well, the theory is that the Fed then needs to pull the cost side for the banking sector down so that the banks can offer lower rates.
Right.
And we had just a week ago, we had seen mortgage rates going up, and I haven't checked, but I'm guessing they're probably coming down at this point. So the Fed is massive action, and that really messed with markets. And initially, what happened, I think, is that markets tanked because, which in theory is the opposite of what the Fed's trying to make happen, right? All of this quantitative easing and stuff is supposed to boost asset prices, and in reality, what it was doing is it was more like sending a negative signal, like, hey, stuff is really, really bad because the Fed's trying to bail us out. It's time to sell, right? And I want to make another comment on the market at some point because things have kind of there's some interesting new developments here that I want to comment on. But so in addition to the Fed, we have had now some sort of legislative policy, or what we would call fiscal policy measures that have come out. Another $700 billion bailout kind of package and that sort of thing. But what's on the horizon here for the next probably day or two, I'm guessing, is a sort of consumer bailout, or an average Joe bailout.
Yeah, is that the what people are mistakenly calling the UBI? Because there's a difference between UBI and what they've been talking.
Yeah, I mean, a UBI is not intended to end, right? Obviously, a UBI is a policy that is just like the whole intention behind Yang and everybody was to put this in place forever, right? So that's the first thing, is right out of the bag, this is supposed to just be a short-term measure. Now, as Milton Friedman said, there's nothing as permanent as a temporary government program. So, we'll see. But my thing is the more push we get to make this really, really big, the more likely it is that it will be short term. So just to discuss a few things. So as far as I know, the last I have seen, and of course this stuff moves super fast, but Tom Cotton. So this morning I've been looking at headlines and stuff. So Tom Cotton has been in the front of a lot of this, right? So Tom Cotton's one to watch, right? Like, those of us over here in the middle of the country really like Josh Hawley, for his trade policy and his, sort of average guy kind of perspective on a lot of this stuff. Student loans, he's had some really good stuff on that.
Imagine basically with Josh Hawley, if you're not familiar with him, if Donald Trump didn't tweet all that much,
right,
and was a little more measured in how he spoke about things.
Well, sort of a straight-laced lawyer guy. I mean, Josh Hawley was the Attorney General of the state of Missouri. So
right, but he's typically liked by a lot of those kinds of people who like Trump for I would say for the right reasons. Instead of the wrong reasons to like the president.
Right. Yeah, he's very much a populist type of right-wing guy. So he has some interesting stuff going on. But Tom Cotton, just to his south, in who's more experienced as a politician, et cetera, man, he is going very hard on the no more trade with China. Let's have a little bit more autarky, et cetera. And I want to put in a plug for my most recent episode where I basically just discussed the idea of risk and free trade, which, risk is never an item on the menu when we're talking about free trade policy, right? It's always talking about GDP, and it's always talking about, you can't stop people from trading across borders. Well, you can. And sometimes,
you can.
sometimes there's a good reason for that. There's a prudent reason for that. So, maybe check that out if you're inclined. But so the Republicans' policy, or the Republican proposal, as far as I know it at this point, is $1,000 per adult and $500 per child, with probably some other stuff about, I don't know this for sure, but I'm guessing there's going to be some stuff about loan payments and stuff like that. Staving those off for a while, or maybe more basic stuff like, you can't foreclose on somebody while this is going on.
Which, by the way, that should be obviously sensible to not foreclose on people during the thing that's going on right now.
Right. Yeah.
For those of you joining us, I have with us Levi of the Trad Dads podcast. He's an economist, not a macro guy by his own admission, but he does understand, those macro concepts better than most of.
I would say I can
do. So
yeah, I can talk to these people. That's I can talk their language. So that's the important thing, I think. So the thing about the Republican policy, or the Republican proposal, why do I keep saying policy? The Republican proposal, the thing about it is that there is right now, the latest proposal I saw was that there was a means testing, which means, so we have these payments proposed, but you only get them if, certain conditions are met. Right now, obviously, that's a lot easier to propose if we're talking about, a normal policy that's going to go into a place in the future and, stay in place for a while. But when it's an emergency kind of thing, all of that means testing delays our payment system. Right now, they're talking about using the IRS to basically, essentially use the IRS's refund function to, basically distribute this thing. So to me, that makes sense is in terms of if you're just trying to get relief to people, putting aside whether or not that makes any sense. If you're going to give relief to people, that's the way that it would make sense to do it, because that's how, people's financial stuff is hooked up to the government. Uh-huh. So their means testing requirement is an income of $75,000. And my understanding is that when you hit a $75,000 income, and I'm guessing it would be like taxable income or something like that, when you hit a $75,000 income limit, they are not going to make those payments to anybody above that level. So now, to me, if the whole idea of this is to help people whose businesses are dying and whose, who are suddenly unemployed, well, to me, that means test doesn't make a ton of sense, because, obviously you've got people who own a business who had been doing well, right? Like, say they own a bar or something. Well, that bar is dead, right? I mean, their local government probably shut it down. Mm-hmm. And so there's nothing they can do about that. And so I don't know if that means test makes a ton of sense. I mean, obviously you can debate that forever, and that's exactly what the Senate and the House are going to be doing. But so there's a lot of means testing things out there. And what's really interesting from a political angle is that the left is just apoplectically angry at Pelosi and Schumer, because they are also proposing means testing.
Yeah, I saw. I saw from them a proposal, the Democratic proposal being, I think it's $2,000 per adult.
Right. So, okay. So here's the thing. So there are a lot of different proposals that came out right after they passed round 2 of relief. That was more kind of bailout-y, right? This sort of average Joe thing in round 3, there were a ton of proposals that were all sent out at the same time. And the most extreme one, and maybe you can put this link in the chat for people to read, Anthony, because I mean, this is the one I sent you on Facebook. This does a great job of kind of showing the context of all of these different proposals and really highlighting Maxine Waters' proposal, which is the most extreme of them. And essentially what it is it's $2,000 per adult, $1,000 per child, no means testing, as far as I know. I think the means testing is like no millionaires and billionaires. So Bernie wouldn't get a check, unfortunately for him, right? 'Cause he's a millionaire. But so and there's a ton of other stuff in the thing, and you can actually just read the proposal too. It's just a memo she sent to her Democrat colleagues. But there's a whole list of things like federal housing, if you're in federal housing or the the federal assisted not assisted living, but the federally backed ones, not the ones that aren't just explicitly government, but the ones where they kind of have a cost share kind of thing for people.
Yeah.
There will be no payments whatsoever. So it's not no rent payments for anybody, but it's no rent payments for federal housing. And then I don't want to use the term debt jubilee, Anthony, but essentially they're saying no payments on people who have, Yeah, I think it's relatively narrow compared with what your average, Yang Gang Zoomer is saying it is. Anybody who has a mortgage on property that is in one of these federal housing programs would not have to pay their mortgage, but everybody else does. I think there's some other relief in there on, debt type of stuff. But to me, if this goes through and all we do is cut out the millionaires and the billionaires, this is debt jubilee. I mean, I don't want to say I'm in favor of this all the time, but if we're ever going to discuss the concept of a debt jubilee, I think this is it. Because, I mean, good grief, man. If everybody in the country, right, even those who are not directly affected by this thing, gets, a family of 5 gets $7,000 a month for the next 2 months. That's a huge debt payoff, right? And let's talk about this for a second, right? Because the thing that people are going to say about this is inflation, right? So,
why don't you define what inflation is and tell us if it actually applies when they're talking about adding digital currency? Because the classic image of inflation is the government firing up the cash printers, but.
Yeah. So, all right. Yeah. Inflation is a very complicated topic. But so essentially what you have is some of the basic definitions would be like, too much money chasing too few goods. Okay. So implicit in that means that there has to be, so from that you get a lot of rules about like, should money grow at the same rate as real GDP growth? Right. And so we have like the Friedman rule. We have what a lot of, let's see, what is it? The nominal GDP level targeting and all of this stuff that a lot of these macro guys are talking about or have been talking about for probably the last, 10 years. And so it's in this case, right, it's a relative thing, right? If you have lots more production and you have lots more goods being produced, then maybe it makes sense to have, money grow at a certain rate because you don't want to end up in what's called a deflationary debt spiral and all this stuff. So inflation, the idea is that, yes, okay, the government's going to go print up a bunch of money. Well, I think that's a fair way to look at it. I would say the Austrian folks would say that inflation is not so the way we define inflation in terms of like if you go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website or whatever, or the Bureau of Economic Analysis, wherever we get these data, if you go look at what inflation is there, it follows this definition of too much money chasing too few goods, right? It follows this definition of, the price level rising. Right now, what's a price level? Well, it's sort of like an average of prices, right? And they try to do what's called a hedonic adjustment. They try to do an adjustment for quality, right? So like, if your TV is better than your TV was 10 years ago, how does, even if the price is higher, well, isn't the fact that the TV better, doesn't that actually matter too, right? So there is that component. But so we have this idea that inflation is a general increase in the price level. Now the Austrian folks would go back and say, no, inflation is an increase in the supply of money, any increase in the supply of money, right? Because the Austrian folks are normally going to be on the side of using precious metal for a currency. And so any increase in the supply of money, they would call that inflation. And say a general increase in the price level is just a result of inflation. I think in this case, if we're going to use the first definition of a general increase in prices, so you have some things going on here. So first of all, the Federal Reserve doing QE and messing with bond markets is not necessarily inflationary. And we saw this last time. Okay. We saw this with the 2008 crash or the 2009 recession and the 2008 financial crisis. This was, we had massive QE. We had a massive increase in the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve with all of these debt assets. And we did not get massive inflation. In fact, the price inflation has been very, very, very mild on an annual basis over the last 10 years. But what we did get was an asset bubble. Okay. So if what happens with QE, I think what we found out is that what happens with QE is it just pushes up asset markets, right? And so, because if you think about it, right, so what is QE doing? Well, it's lowering the cost of borrowing. Well, if that's the case, right, and if you think about borrowing as leverage, right, maybe that's something for your listeners to look up if they want to do a little economics education while they're sitting at home. That leverage, that cheap leverage for firms is going to result in higher profits for them. And those higher profits are going to get sort of bid into their asset prices, right? And so that's one mechanism for QE to push up asset markets, but not result in price inflation, right? Because that money's not going into the pocket of average Joe, right?
Yeah.
Now, would this round 3 money in the pocket of the average Joe thing, would that result in a general increase in the price level, right? Would we see massive inflation from that? And I would say that it is certainly possible, but it really depends on what people, and again, see here I'm being a very mainstream macro person, right? I'm talking as a mainstream macro person now with all of this. This is not Austrian orthodoxy by any stretch. So would this result in price inflation? Well, it depends. Like I said, it depends on what people do with it. If they're going to go out and buy, cigarettes and all of that stuff with it, right? That has the potential to raise the price of those goods, right? Because if everybody now has more cash, then certain markets, the prices in certain markets will rise relative to others, right? And but if what people do in general with this money is they go and pay debt off, then that would not result in an increase in consumer prices. And you also think about where the money comes from, right? So, whenever we talk about price inflation, we're normally talking about consumer prices, right? Or we're talking about deflating GDP, which again is essentially consumer stuff. It's GDP is final goods, right? It's the stuff you buy. It's the value of that. It's not the value of the entire supply chain, to put it simply. So the consumer price index, that's measuring consumer prices. That's not measuring the inputs for your firm, right? So if this money is taken, so it's sort of, this is the weird thing about government, right? Is like, where is this money going to come from? Well, it's going to come from the Fed essentially just goosing the market even more, but instead of it going into asset markets, it's going to go into retail, or it's going to go into paying off debt. And so if it goes into paying off debt, right? So this is probably a Paul Krugman point here. Okay. So I'm not saying I like Paul Krugman, but I'm saying sometimes the guy has some decent things to say, just like Keynes does. I think if this goes into paying off debt, not only would this accomplish our sort of a modern equivalent of debt jubilee, but well, and I mean, it depends on where the tax come from, right? Because the thing is, it's always going to get taxed, right? Even if the Fed provides it right now, all that does is it just increases the U.S. debt, which an increase in the U.S. debt is just an increase in future tax obligations, right? So that I would say is probably the big picture on this. So whether or not it's inflationary, it depends on where people spend it. Whether or not it has negative consequences down the road, because see, it's like borrowing from the future, right? So if though, this is going to increase a tax obligation for the future, but who's going to pay those taxes? Well, we don't know.
Right.
Right.
So I wanted to talk about like what should a Catholic do just in general in this current situation, because you and I have this sort of shared belief in subsidiarity and solidarity and the rest of the principles of Catholic social teaching. And so let's say, next week they announce that everyone is going to be getting $1,000 times X per month based on their family size as a check. What does a Catholic do with that money?
Right.
And in general, what does a Catholic who is still employed, still has a job, and their situation really hasn't changed that much other than maybe their stock portfolio, if they have one, it doesn't look very nice right now. What do they do in this situation? So, for instance, I know what my thought on this is in general, which is if you're able to, still get food from the local restaurant as a pickup if you can do so without violating the sensible social distancing things that are going on right now.
Right.
If you order a pizza, tip your driver. And I'm not saying that because my side gig is delivering pizza. But
yes, you are.
the chances that anybody in my audience or even in my own town are slim to none.
Yeah, that's true.
Whether you do it through one of those, mobile food delivery apps like DoorDash or Grubhub or whatever, if you can, do sensible consumer purchasing, continue doing those things, because a lot of what the economy is going through right now, and I'm not talking like, go buy vain garbage,
Right.
I'm going to go buy, the Marvel Cinematic Universe entire box set because they sell that. I mean, if you want to, that's your business. But still try to be active, because at the end of the day, these are human beings and their livelihood we're talking about here. So
sure.
I
think my bigger concern, honestly, is not the online world, right? Like everybody has more time to go buy some books from, Jeff Bezos, and, help out the people that are writing those books. Everybody has more time to listen to podcasts, for ad revenue. Everybody has more time for that kind of thing that they can do in their house. Right. I would say, while you're sitting in your house, if you still have your job and you're working from home, or you're going to work, and your municipality or your county or your state has not completely locked down all activity. So essentially, if you don't live in a city, right?
Right.
A major city, I guess. I would say, subscribe to your local newspaper. If you live in a small town and you are still doing fine, financially, do that, because your local newspaper is probably more valuable now than it ever has been, because they are telling you what your municipality is doing.
Right, and they'll also be where a lot of the local job listings will be. So, for instance,
true.
There's an Oklahoma City based grocery store chain that hired 300 people, full-time employees, for its 8 locations. You can guess why they did that, because the grocery stores like. I was talking this morning with somebody I know who is a department manager of one of those stores in their frozen food section, and he was saying that their store is doing $500,000 in business a day. That's 2.5 times their normal business. So
there's definitely right now sort of a reorganization of what's profitable, and so you're right that the people who need a boost are these. I have a buddy who runs some of those escape houses And so I just went online and bought a couple t-shirts off of his site, or, I may later on, I might buy a gift card or something. I mean, these people need revenue today, even if it's pulling revenue from the future, that's fine. They need to be, they're not going to be able to feed their family without something going on now. So try to think out of the box, and if you, and like you said, you have your local grocery store hiring people. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be super important, right? And they're closing early, right? All the retail shops in my town are closing early to clean the place. And that really is effective. I mean, that's not nothing. That is going to allow people to be safely to be able to come in there. And so, yeah, you're right. I think this is an interesting moment for, on the one hand, subsidiarity, right? And understanding the importance of your municipality, your municipal government, and the ways you can help people in your town. But it's also very interesting to see the sort of oligarchy of the United States change too. Right. You've got Lex Luthor, right? Jeff Bezos hiring 100,000 people and giving every one of his hourly workers a $2 raise per hour.
While at the same time, Bezos World, as I call it, or Amazon, is restricting their sales to. They're basically only going to ship things soon if it includes essentials in the order.
Right.
I mean, that tells you how like what consumer spending is probably going to look like when that next report comes out.
Right. And the CEO of GM, she said that they're basically going to shut a lot of these plants are shutting down because the workers are too afraid to be in there. But the CEO of GM said that she wants to clean her facilities and she wants to start making ventilators instead of cars. I mean,
that's cool.
And, Tucker was talking about Liberty Gardens, right? I mean, plant a garden, if you, not to take anything away from your local, Piggly Wiggly or whatever, but, that's probably good. I mean, it's getting to be spring here. So,
I know, like one of the tribal grocery store in town has potato starters. And I don't know a thing about how to plant them, so I need to do some research, but I've wanted to grow potatoes for them because you can grow those anywhere. Now, The other thing is, like, this will sound fairly somewhat self-serving, but if you're, if you are, subscribed to, like, through a paid membership to someone like Tradcat Night or Church Militant or who else has got a paid website, any of those kind of things, or you're supporting a content creator, keep doing that. And I'm not just saying that to be self-serving, but, like, I'm a patron of Tumblr House and of Census Fidelium, and I have no plan to stop doing that. Just because, that's economic activity that helps people in a very real way. The other thing I would suggest doing is, if you're gonna, one of the things I would suggest is if you're going to, like, keep trying to, supporting businesses during this prudentially, there's an Italian restaurant that's family run in my town, and their parking lot's been pretty empty the last few days, and I'm thinking about, here in a couple nights getting some food from them as takeout. Right. Because that's family run. Like, you are literally helping people directly in a legitimate way. That's not, it's not charity. You're literally helping them in a very reasonable way. And that's the thing too, is like the importance of work and the importance of private ownership, right? So this is very distributive friendly, right? Contra the claims that this is socialism, right? We're not just doing handouts, right? We're just, I pull a little bit of money out of my savings account, my little emergency fund, because I'm employed by the government. I'm not worried about my job, but we spent some money doing takeout from our local barbecue joint, because I just and when I went in there to do the takeout to get my food, I mean, there were 6 people and this place is packed every night. Oh, I know. Every night. That's the thing. Like, the other day it was my wife's birthday recently, and I picked up the place I wanted to take her was in a town where they've ordered all the restaurants closed. Except for takeout, except the town is 40 minutes away, so it's not really good for takeout. So I picked her up some Mexican from a local Mexican place, another family-run place. And this is a place where during lunch on a Wednesday, if you Wednesday, Tuesday, doesn't matter what weekday, 11:30 to 1:30, you can't even find a place to park. Right. I picked it up at a lunchtime, and the only cars there were there were 2 other cars there. Everyone else was getting takeout, and there were 2 people in the dine-in because my town hasn't shut that down yet. So I'm just saying, don't be afraid to do things in a way that doesn't violate sort of the steps being asked of us that are prudential,
Right.
Because
and don't put yourself in a bad situation either. I mean, we're not saying who have just lost their jobs. I mean, no, certainly not. But I will say, Anthony, this is a very good example of why we like this idea of single income earner households, right? Because if, and now that sounds silly, right? It's like, it sounds like you have a single prop, a single engine on your airplane and that engine goes out. But the reality of it is that if you have someone making, doing the homemaking, you have, well, essentially your wife, if the wife is at home, already taking care of the children, already, gardening and stuff like that, you're probably in a better place, right? Mm-hmm. You're probably, even if you lose your job, you're probably in a better place than the average person who, and let's face it, right? Most people, even if they have a 2-income household, they probably both lost their jobs, so it doesn't really solve anything necessarily to have this 2-income thing. And so it's kind of interesting to think about, it's like all of a sudden all these people are homeschooling now. And, I'm seeing all this horrible stuff from people who, it's not that I don't like them, but for Pete's sake, the stuff that they're doing, it's like, well, I don't really know what to do with little Johnny now. And it's like, well, why not? It's your kid, for Pete's sake.
My wife has been researching homeschooling because, she was homeschooled, but, we have a toddler and we plan to homeschool. Uh-huh. And all the indications are that, if your kid's not in high school, then the amount of work they need to get done homeschooling to give them a solid education takes 2 to 3 hours a day.
Right. That's totally true. And the thing is, even in the schools, that's all the time they actually, because most of the time the teacher's trying to deal with, the kid who won't obey or getting everybody to line up in a line, or whatever, right?
The pointless busy work and pointless activities.
Exactly.
And then you could make sure your kid spends, a portion of the rest of their free time doing something constructive.
Right.
So it's don't be afraid of the anti-homeschooling propaganda. It's really just funny. Like, it would almost be funny if on the other side of this this mess we're dealing with right now, if the world was a lot more right ordered. I mean, is anybody else amused as I am that Playboy magazine has shut down their print edition completely because of this, or that a lot of the hookup culture is gone now?
Gone. I saw something like somebody
Porn Valley's out of business right now. I mean, I'm like, I don't want to like what's going on, but like,
right. Well, on the other hand, Anthony, I have heard that because everybody's at home now, the delivery mechanisms of this degeneracy are doing very well.
That is the flip side of it. So, but one step at a time, I guess, right?
Oh no, well, yeah. You don't look a gift horse in the mouth. I mean, so I want to, if I have are we at a point where I can change our direction here?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I want to talk about the market response right now to, and when I say market, I mean like the stock market. So what's interesting is that with a little bit of jostling, pretty much any measure in the stock market is up right now. So the S&P 500 is up 1.84%. So the S&P 500 is probably a broader measure. It's 500 stocks. And S&P is a Standard & Poor's, a very large financial company. The Dow, the 30 stocks in the Dow Industrial Average are up 1.7. The NASDAQ, which is an index of all of the stocks on the NASDAQ, which NASDAQ used to be tech. That's not everything that's on the NASDAQ now, but the NASDAQ is up 3.54%. The Russell 2000, which unfortunately I have nothing to do with, even though that's my last name. The Russell 2000 index is an index of 2,000 small cap companies, is up 4.5%. So that's impressive. And now, does that wipe out the losses? No. But the fact that I guess what I'm saying is I don't think this is what we call a dead cat bounce. I think this is a response to the unprecedented action of the Fed primarily and the federal legislature.
Yeah, this bizarre turn to bipartisanship.
Right. Yeah. So gold and silver are both up, which almost seems weird, but I think those are probably up because we're still seeing kind of what we call a flight to quality. In other words, people moving into commodities because they're worried about inflation. Crude oil just jumped probably on the same thing. In fact, crude oil is up 21%. But now crude oil had just crashed, so because of the Saudis last Monday. So
right, there's that. I mean, that's the Saudis' timing to do to do the things they were doing. Let me put it this way: in Oklahoma City, there was gas prices at $1.25 for E10, 10% ethanol. I drive a Jeep Liberty. Those things are not exactly the most fuel efficient vehicles ever made, and I paid $1.79 for 100% gas.
Right.
That's ridiculous. Yep. I saw that. I was like, well, the cheap's E10's 30 cents cheaper, but at $1.79, I'll put the real stuff in and get 10 to 15% better mileage out of it.
I went for a drive last night in my 8-cylinder vehicle, and I really kind of bashing themselves in the face over this whole thing, probably.
Right. Like I don't know. I don't know much about stocks, but I can tell you that common sense dictates fuel prices will not be where they are now on the other side of this thing.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then the oil companies are going to do very well. So they're going to have a nice bounce back.
Right. So the FTSE is also up too, which is Great Britain's stock market.
They call theirs the FTSE.
It's FTSE. So that's how I pronounce it. The Nikkei is down. The Japanese stock exchange is still down. But
what's the Dow? Is the Dow doing okay today? I haven't even looked.
Oh yeah. No, I mentioned the Dow already. The Dow is up. Actually, yeah. So the Dow is up 2.02% now. I'm watching the live feed on Yahoo Finance.
Yeah, and I'm not a guy who takes the stock market conditions as much of an indicator of anything, other than that people will look to it as a signal and then act as if it is a signal of things. And so I'm
yeah. It's a behavioral thing. Yeah.
Right. That's all. That's all it is to me.
I just got an email, and I want to mention this, that the Holy Father has asked us to pray the Rosary at 9 p.m. Italy time, so that's 3 p.m. for us in the Central Time Zone.
He's asking people to pray the Luminous Mysteries, which I'll pray the Rosary at 3. But I'm not. I haven't prayed the Luminous.
You're not a luminous guy.
No, I haven't prayed the Luminous Mysteries probably in about 5 years. So. Today's Thursday. Yeah. It's on the traditional Rosary. It's the Joyful Mysteries today. So he's asking people.
Well, Thursday is the luminous day. If yeah, that's the only reason why. Yeah.
Right. So now here's the thing. Like a lot of people are going to be like, well, why, they'll laugh and such about him doing it. But think about it this way. Francis is the same guy who a year ago was making snarky comments about people, counting rosary beads and such, and now he's asking the public, he's asking the world to pray the rosary.
Mm-hmm.
So,
not a bad thing.
That's not a bad thing. So
no, no, sir.
So if you can, you maybe hop on that intention today, even if you don't do the luminous. Like I said, I haven't prayed the Luminous in a while, like in 5 years. I was sitting there today going, all right, what are the Luminous Mysteries? Well, the first Luminous Mystery is the Wedding Feast of Cana, and the fifth is the Transfiguration. And what is 2, 3, and 4? It's been that long since I prayed them.
Right.
I'd have to actually, I can do, traditional rosary without any kind of guidance, but that I'd actually have to go look up what that is. It's been such a long time.
And I will say, Anthony, on your suggestion, I did go and get a few weeks ago. I got the Seven Sorrows Rosary.
Very nice.
So I'm looking forward. Our plan was to do that as part of our Lenten penance, but we had a few other things for our Lenten penances, and that one got left off. So hopefully we will get to that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to 3 p.m. And so you said Thursday is joyful. Is that right?
Traditionally, the cycle starts over on Thursday, so you would get joyful, then sorrowful on Friday, and then glorious on Saturday, and then whatever is appropriate to the liturgical season on Sunday. So
which would be sorrowful.
Lent is the sorrowful mysteries. So
right. Okay.
And it took me a little while to learn that when I first started going to the Latin Mass, and they'd be praying the Rosary before Mass, and I'd be like, okay, and then I would hear sorrowful mystery on Sunday. I'm like, what? So
right. Yeah. Well, that's good.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, I don't see anything wrong with praying the Rosary today. For anybody who just has this gut
or
reaction,
any other day,
right? And anybody who has a gut reaction of doing the opposite of whatever Pope Francis asks, praying the Rosary today at 3:00 is a legitimate request. Of even if you don't think he's the true Pope, he's a cardinal bishop at the least, according to that mindset, he can still request that. So come on, don't be afraid of praying the rosary.
Of course.
And that's a topic I never get into. So, but
Right.
if you're gonna on this economics talk, if you're going, when I do think they're going to actually send money out. They did it under Obama. It wasn't.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna get Maxine plan, but I think that Pelosi is going to cave to the far left, and they're not going to really do a lot of means testing, and so this is going to end up being a this is going to end up being a pretty significant payout.
Right. So I would suggest if you're going to use that money for something, if you're wanting to find the best way to do the good Catholic duty of supporting your neighbors with it, go buy a pizza from the mom and pop Italian restaurant down the road.
Yeah. And the thing is too, I think, Anthony, is to remember that is an important thing for you to be doing all the time. Right.
Right.
This is part of us, operating ethically in markets is localism.
Right. And it's easier said than done often, especially if you live out in the part of the country that I do, where things are, the nearest city is 45 minutes away to go buy something. So at that point, local becomes kind of a fluid concept, but
sure. Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying you have to, become completely autarkic within your town of 12,000 people, but yeah.
So give you an idea. One of the things I plan to do is next week at some point, I'm going to go on to either the, whichever monk's website that Mike Church's show sells coffee for, and either go directly to their website and buy coffee from them, or I'm going to go to the Founders Trading Post through Mike Church's website. I'm not being paid to plug them. I'm just saying that's where I'm going to go, and I'm going to buy a bunch of coffee roasted from monks.
Right.
And I can go to the local monastery and buy Mystic Monk coffee. Now the thing is, I don't know if the local monastery's store is open right now, because they may have shut it down in accordance with what the Archbishop of Oklahoma City has requested. I don't know. I haven't been up there yet. So
right. And I would say the other thing, Anthony, is besides this, I think very sensible suggestion to shop local with this Yang Bucks or Trump Bucks or what was it, Donald Dollars. I mean, I like Donald Dollars. Come on, I think that's a good one. Whatever
dollars.
You do with these, yeah. If your Donald Dollars go to your local businesses, I think that's great. But I think the other thing to do is to remember that if you have debt, this is a great time to go ahead and just sock a whole bunch of that away. Because every dollar you spend on top of your normal payment for whatever debt we were talking about is $1 less you pay in interest, and is $1 less in usury. So that would be another thing to do. Is if you want to hear my take on usury, I have a couple of episodes on usury on my podcast. So check those out, especially if you think you might disagree with me, because that's always fun. So, but yeah, check that out. And I like I said, Anthony, I think this is a great time for. And if you worry about inflation, well, every part you do to throw this money into debt is going to stave off another dollar's worth of inflation. So
right. So if you've got some credit card debt that you've been meaning to pay off, throw some of that money to paying it off, or pay off your car loan, or
there you go.
Make a principal payment on your house. Although at the end of the day, that means that the money goes directly to the financial institutions, and I know that will lead to there's a big debate around that, but.
Sure, but I would say that the thing is you're already in it anyway, so you might as well just get out and obviously maybe this goes without saying, but prioritize things that either are your highest payment or depending on your financial situation, or prioritize things that are your highest interest rate. So don't put something on your house when you have a credit card, because very likely your credit card, your house payment's not going away. Very likely, and your credit card is very high interest, and the payment's high. And the thing about credit cards is the interest is wild. And but the other thing about it is that if you pay it down, your payment goes down immediately. Your house payment's not going to go down if you pay on it.
Unless you go and refinance or something.
Well, yeah, but that's going to cost you $2,500 to refinance it. So
Right. So
yeah.
now there was this one thing in the Maxine Waters proposal that I find interesting, and that's the student loan thing. I only managed to look at it very briefly before we went on, but she's talking about she's talking about some sort of student loan forgiveness, but this is not I have $100,000 in student debt and now it's poof gone.
Right.
So
she's writing off 10 grand. Yeah.
Which, look, there's $1.5 trillion or something out there of student loan debt. And the average student out there has like $35,000 in student debt. So what you're going to end up having is the people who only wanted to pay for like their last year of undergraduate or their part of a year or 1 year of grad school having their student debt paid off, and that's about it. Like, maybe a lot of those kids at who made the mistake of going to ITT Tech and those kind of places, because those sorts of schools, those fly-by-night schools, own a staggering amount, are the cause of a staggering amount of student debt in this country.
Right.
So,
right. Well, I just want to share one last thing here, Anthony. Breaking news: Trump has approved chlorinique the FDA has approved chlorinique, chloroquine.
Is this a vaccine for that which shall not be named?
No, it's not vaccine. It's not vaccines. They were being tested as they're malaria treatments, and they're being tested as treatments for, I'm guessing, the symptom. I mean, obviously you can't treat a virus, but treatment for the symptms of that thing that will not be named. But yeah, chloroquine and remdesivir. But see, this funny thing is like if you just Google those names and go to the news thing, I mean, it was like 2 days ago that people were that they were announcing testing of these things, and it's already approved. I mean, that is unreal.
That's ridiculous. So now,
these
are I remember reading about one of these in passing this morning or yesterday, and these are things that were 1940s era malaria drugs, right?
I don't know about all that. I was just sharing that because it's popping up.
Let's see. Tate Brown says that they lost 90% of their Uber income since the shutdown. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Man.
So not all the tech companies employees are doing well, but man, and that's the thing is if you find yourself in go look at a grocery store for a job because they may be hiring people.
Yeah, but not even kidding. Like,
no, I mean they are, and heck, if you,
it's hard work. It's hard work. I've worked it. I worked for Kroger for just before I moved out to Oklahoma to take a job at a Catholic university that no longer exists. But it's hard work, and you will learn a good work ethic, and it's honest work too.
But also if you have an Amazon center anywhere close to you, do check them out too. Because I don't like Jeff Bezos any more than anyone else. But just to get you by right now, maybe your only option. So
yeah. So does anybody have any questions in the chat they want to ask us before we end this? Either put them in the chat in the normal way or a tiny super chat, whatever you want to do. Just make it so if it's in the chat that I can see it, because sometimes the chat can be active enough that it's hard to keep up. So if anybody's got any questions, this is the time to ask them. They are hiring stickers for overnight.
Stalkers.
Stalkers, yes. Yeah.
Overnight stalking. Yeah, and probably people to disinfect shelves and stuff like that too.
And probably security. They got to have armed security for all the toilet paper stacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah. Well, here's a quick tweet just while we're waiting for those to come in.
Yeah.
Orrin Cass has an Atlantic op-ed. Two things. The issue for businesses is fixed costs, which remain even if you're not selling. Mm-hmm. That's exactly the problem. You think about a restaurant, right? They got to pay rent. They got to pay the bills. And when their municipality shuts them down, they can't pay those things. And number two, shutdowns conceptually as a form of government taking for which owners deserve compensation. So let me share that with you so you can put it in the chat if people want to read it. Because I'm not a huge fan of Cass.
So,
Yes,
so
but
Elizabeth in the chat asks, "What will banks do when you can't pay your mortgage or car payment?" Well, didn't they say that part of what they're talking about doing right now is a temporary moratorium on foreclosures and those sorts?
yes.
And I would assume that goes with repos too, though, wouldn't it? With for a vehicle.
Yeah, so my understanding is that in the Maxine Waters proposal, which I'm betting with a lot of the Democrats, and I mean, and here's the thing, right? When we looked at round two, you know, and even round one of the legislation stuff, Pelosi, they just kind of put whatever they wanted in there. And I mean, even, Trump's, advisors and former advisors were like, look, dude, we just need to pass the damn thing. Who cares? Like even Rand Paul was like, look, I'm just gonna, swallow it and vote for it.
Or are they? Yeah, they're staring down the barrel of potentially 20% unemployment by the end of the year. So
right. So my point is that, So my point is, I think we're going to get something from one of the Democrat proposals. And if you read the piece that Anthony put out there, please do read that because it does have a good, at least for the next probably 6 hours, good information. The article explains a lot of the proposals, and what I'm thinking is that yes, so Maxine Waters is calling for not only no foreclosures or repossessions, but also no negative credit reporting even.
Oh wow, I don't want to like Maxine Waters. Please don't make like.
Sure, yeah.
But sometimes.
But look, even if Maxine, it tells people to go buy local. I'm not going to disagree with her just because I don't like her.
Well, right. Like, do you know who it used to be that it was the left who were the biggest proponents of buy local just up till a few years ago when all of a sudden the world started going crazy a few years ago. Then they changed their tune. So.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. That's totally true.
Byzantine Roman, could this be the beginning of a 4-year chastisement, a test run, or are we in the middle of it? See my video today if you haven't seen it yet. I kind of asked that question.
Yeah.
If you work for the church, can you get unemployment? Yes. Churches are classified as nonprofit organizations. I believe even if you're self-employed and things happen, you could probably get unemployment, although that's a little trickier, but...
Yeah, I think that's the thing is I think this is the part of the reason why the feds want to do this way is because traditional unemployment is going to be very difficult. You have to go stand in line. We know how bad that is. But the point of them just sending this to your bank account or sending you a check in the mail, no questions asked, essentially, is that it bypasses all that bureaucratic nonsense and it just gets it done.
Right.
And even if you're self-employed, Maxine Waters plan, like you said, I've got 3 kids. My oldest is 8. So I'm a little more experienced than Anthony on the parenting and homeschooling thing. But that's $7,000 a month for the next 2 months, right? Everybody's talking about 2 payments at this point, right? Even Trump's proposals and all that stuff, the most frugal Democrat proposals are talking about 2 payments. So to the extent that they're monthly, there will be 2 of them.
Right. Is it likely that things will go past 2 months? Possibly. It depends. Like,
yeah,
the thing I want people to remember is with how quickly the stock market just tanked, the rebound is probably going to be spectacular. Now,
the rebound is already pretty good.
Yeah, it's not, and it's. If what we see today holds,
sure.
And also don't think like if you have stocks that you lost money, because here's the thing, you only lose money if you sell. Now, sometimes you're in a position where you have to sell, but don't think that you lost money, like unless you're getting dividends regularly or something.
Sure. So on that front, right? So is it the case that last week that some of these companies just became half as valuable as they were that week? No, not really, right? Probably a write down for some of these companies, depending on what they are, what's going to happen in the future, right? Mm-hmm. How people are going to reorient the way their lives are going. But my guess is that, if you're close to retirement, and I'm not, but if you're close to retirement and you're worried about this, I would say, just write it out. This is not financial advice, and I'm not a licensed financial advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. But to me, I'm not guessing this is going to be, a permanent state. And I mean, so if you're in mutual funds and stuff like that, just don't worry about it. Just, if you pull now, then you will, what we call, realize all of the paper losses. So my non-advice, wink, wink, entertainment only, is to not do that.
Yeah.
And Anthony is also not a licensed financial advisor, and only entertainment purposes.
I'm a political scientist.
Yes, there you go.
So,
and they really know nothing about this stuff. Just kidding.
That's true. Like, in my public policy PhD program, they make us take advanced political economy because they assume most of us looked at Econ 101 and went, ew. So,
yeah, right.
That's a heck of a thing to do, by the way, to jump from basically Econ 101 to reading Milton Friedman and Keynes and power transition theory and all this other weird stuff that gets covered under political economy.
Which honestly is probably more valuable, if I'm honest.
Maybe. I mean, they had us read, when it came time to read Friedman, we got to choose one of two books of his, and I chose his pop consumption, really thin book. And I had to buy 2 copies of it because I kept losing it.
Well, that was probably a sign from God.
Right.
That was probably your guardian angel.
This. Yeah, the guardian angel.
Don't read this trash, Anthony.
Yeah, the guardian angel yeeted the book out of my eyesight.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Friedman's book is my initial thought when reading it was, wow, this is where all those bumper stickers came from. That's literally every page had some sort of bumper sticker slogan in it. It was great.
Yeah.
But then again, I have had books by people that I fundamentally disagreed with. In fact, I have a bunch of academic books by people I fundamentally disagree with still. So, reading, I have a book by Peter Singer. If you don't know who he is, he's the guy who is an animal rights activist who advocates for only 500 million people being allowed to live on the planet at any time.
Yeah, that's pretty sick.
That guy is a special case. and I have hit one of his most notorious books that I'm looking at right now on my shelf because I had to read it in grad school, and reading things from people we don't agree with is good. Which means, you know what? If you want a good Lenten sacrifice, go to America Magazine's website and read James Martin's latest article. I don't even know what he said in it, but I'm sure it's something he'll say and it will enrage you.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding, man. No kidding. Are there any other questions in there, or are we?
No, we got people disagreeing, saying that things not going to that today's rebound won't hold, and it might not. Stock market's cringe. You're going to write it to zero. Invest in real assets. Hey, if you have the ability to go buy tangible property right now, do it.
Well, I mean, hold on. Let me address that. So, what you're saying is it's going to go to zero. Okay, so what that essentially means is that every company in the entire country that is in your mutual fund is going to die, go bankrupt, and be reorganized into some other firm. That's what would have to happen if you're saying the stock market is going to zero.
That would be Apple. Apple and Disney going away. That would be General Motors and Ford Motor Company going away.
All of them. Now that forever.
That could happen. We're talking great chastisement of Catholic prophecy, resetting civilization. But at that point, the stock market isn't something you'll be thinking about at all.
Yeah, you're not going to get any. You're not going to what. Gold and silver index funds? No. Good luck. If that happens, you're not getting paid anything. I mean, if you have access to physical metals, sure, but nobody does. Good luck. Where's your physical metals? I mean, you have to be a hedge fund in order to have enough volume to be able to get special vault access. I mean, this is just a fantasy, right? Just because okay, yeah, the stock market's going to go to zero. Okay. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in real estate right now, but, again, this is entertainment only, but I mean, part of me understands the flight to quality thing, but the flight to quality thing, in other words, putting your money in precious metals and stuff, still assumes that the system is there because, in other words, the flight to quality thing is just a short-term play. Oh, it's a day trade.
Here it is, Gulch economy. Is that a reference to Atlas Shrugged? Because Ayn Rand it was the promulgator of probably the most satanic ideology ever devised.
Yeah,
ever.
Definitely. Definitely.
It's wicked. I can't even. I can't even.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's again, the libertarian stuff.
Buy fallow land. Yeah, that's probably not a bad idea. You can probably get fallow land for pretty cheap too.
Well, and especially if rates are low, right? I mean, if you're talking about like serious acquisition of, and I mean, okay, yeah, if you just have like $3 million to play with, okay, well, call your advisor. I'm not your guy. But my guess is that with rates low like this, this is, this is going to be a time where essentially those asset prices are going to be falling.
Yeah.
Well, no, excuse me. Asset prices are going to be rising, but it's going to be easy to get credit for them. So if you already own land, it's probably going to be more valuable than it was. So.
Still not as satanic as communism. Apparently, Ayn Rand isn't as bad as communism. That might actually that might actually be true.
well, sure, but I mean, it's
the bar's set pretty low for that.
But also, in what world are they alternatives, right? I mean,
right. Sandra asks, I wonder if things may go all to Bitcoin or something similar. Maybe why coins will be thrown in the street and why you may have to get some sort of mark in order to do business. I think Bitcoin's too decentralized for anybody to take over easily. What worried me was when I heard that some of the central authorities were wanting to do their own version of Bitcoin, like FedCoin. I was like, oh no. Yeah. I'm like, guys, no block. I don't want the government involved in blockchain.
Yeah, I think that's a bad idea. I think, over time, this is going to take a long time. We're going to see a move away from traditional financial institutions. But I mean, the reality is that right now, the Federal Reserve has less control over, these things like rates and stuff like this than, the 4 or 5 largest financial institutions on the planet do anyway. I mean, the credit markets are essentially private things now. So,
yeah. Any other questions before we call this relatively short stream? I watched like some angry nerd live stream where like the next day I saw that the guy got done for 6.5 hours straight. And I'm just like,
no.
How do you talk about like how bad new Star Trek is? And
how do you sit in a chair for that long?
Well, people do it in cubes all the time.
Oh man.
Let's see. Have I looked at the debt clock? Yeah, the national debt is something to be legitimately concerned about, especially since the federal government, there's a federal law that requires Congress to pay the interest of it every year. That's why there is an upper limit to it. Yeah,
well, like I said, there's this is, if any of these proposals go through, I mean, we are borrowing from our offspring. And the reality is that, the common sense on this makes a ton of sense because the person who pays off the principal of that loan gets royally screwed. And so this whole thing of like we owe it to ourselves, Paul Krugman style, is just the worst of academia.
I think one of the most poignant little details that people usually miss when they read Charles Coulomb's Star Spangled Crown is that his mythical monarchy that sort of rules the United States after the collapse of the Republic is that the welfare state pretty much doesn't exist, that there's a gigantic border wall that makes what Trump has been proposing look bashful by comparison, and that most of the royal or federal budget goes to paying off the debt of the previous government. That just isn't much of a welfare state because that reality is coming sooner, probably in our grandchildren's lifetime, if not sooner.
Yeah. Highly likely.
Humanism is a category, communism an ideal. Do I think the government is overreacting? I think there's a lot to be said about the influence of the opinion makers. I'd be careful saying anything negative about the opinion makers because I think that's what caused my channel to get throttled. So
yeah, probably.
The opinion makers, their reaction to things, I think, has helped push where we are now. That isn't to say don't act prudentially. There might be something to just be smart about everything right now, but don't panic. And that's kind of the whole point. Like, if you do end up getting that check from the government, do some good with it.
Right.
Shop local. Like, what would you? Because the last thing we want to see is coming out of the other side of this a recovery that, you know, the local hardware store and the local mom and pop Italian restaurants are gone, and now you've got an Olive Garden and
Yeah.
a or Home Depot replacing them all.
And that's what I meant earlier when I said globalism. Globalism caused this problem, and then all of the risk and all of the problems it caused are now killing those who do not benefit from globalism, and globalism will take over if we don't try to stand in its way to some extent.
I'm laughing at Mark Trusso's comment that I can't read on YouTube.
Oh,
If you can go see the chat, it's pretty funny. I've been told by the Ukrainians from the underground church that Lucifer is the head of the communist conspiracy. I mean, it's essentially, I don't know if they actually overtly worship the devil, but at the end of the day, it's turning the state into an idol. That's what communism does.
right. Yep. Yep.
We're not paying anything back. What planet am I on? Well, it depends what happens. I don't forecast timelines for anything. I just say that the federal government has a law that requires them to pay on the interest. And that eats up a little bit of the budget every time they pass a new budget because the debt grows. And that will put a cap on it someday. And I remember back in my days long ago when I was, kind of sort of a progressive, people complaining about, how we couldn't get national health care because the Republicans were purposely spending lots and lots of money to blow the debt up so that we could never get the money needed. Disregard the fact that, Bernie Sanders' national health care plan would cost something like $15 trillion or something.
Yeah, that's breathtaking. Yeah. I mean, that's unreal, dude.
And I don't know if that actually counts the fact that he promised it to anybody who gets into the United States.
Oh, no, it doesn't. No. And yeah, and that's, I mean, if this is an argument for anything, and this is the point of the most recent episode of my podcast, is like, if this makes an argument for anything, it makes an argument for a significant curtailment of free trade. And I didn't say that, I didn't talk about borders in this one, but the corollary to that is shut the dang borders now completely.
Hey, Mexico shut the border between the U.S. and its border with the U.S. to defend itself against the thing going on, which I will never cease to find hilarious.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, it's,
Patrick, I was never a Bernie bro. I was more of a, before he lost his mind, I thought Joe Biden was okay. That's about as left as I ever got. Like, I was.
No, well, that's not that bad.
No, it's not. I mean, like, if Joe Biden became president, the thing that I'd be afraid of would be all the technocrats who'd be doing this job for him. Because, I mean, let's be honest about him. Like, and actually, if you want to see anything that makes me really mad, it's not. I don't agree with him on almost anything, right? But the way that the party is treating somebody who's seriously got something obviously wrong with his health, that infuriates me. That's wicked. That's evil, and like
it is.
It just makes me very angry. Like the guy, like I've seen footage of him like mid speech talking, then all of a sudden looking around, trying to figure out where he is, and it just makes me want to go. I can't say what it makes me want to do.
Yeah, let's let the guy be, man. Like, I mean, it really is sad. I mean, he's a human. Like, he's a person, and he's old, and he's very sick, and they just need to leave him alone.
Yeah. What a dog-faced pony soldier. I would say if he became president, we would be back to all those wonderful, wonderful onion gags from like the Obama presidency. Those are so good.
Oh man.
Those are so good.
The one about him like painstakingly cleaning his like 1987 Trans Am in the on the front lawn of the White House is so funny. Like I absolutely passed out laughing. So funny.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, that is so good. Let's see. Is there a puppet master in the background? I don't know.
I mean, it's kind of funny how it's like
I would like there to be that simply because it would mean that that's some sort of competency behind everything weird going on. Yeah. But I really honestly think we're at the point where where all the competency has long since exited stage left. Like even like what Big Bad George S is trying to do internationally just
Yeah.
seems like flailing at this point. Like, it really looks like we're going through a political realignment. And we're talking about one of those once a century realignments, and they're always messy. The last one we got,
And it's beautiful.
yes, it is. And the last one we got was, with, as far as I can tell, was ushered in by the Depression, and the one we got before that was ushered in through the civil wars in Europe in the 1840s and the American Civil War, and before that was the French Revolution and all that stuff. I mean, these things are always messy.
Yeah.
So I don't know,
And
like, if there is a puppet master, I'm wondering if he's thinking about how scary it was to follow the stockbrokers in the Depression when they took their long walk out of their office windows.
Yeah, right.
Because like this whole thing is just, this is the stuff that as a political scientist I've kind of noticed that the signs were coming.
Yeah.
And now that it might be happening, I'm just like, oh man, like, because these things are always messy. Like, look at the American government before the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And what it was afterwards. Like, people always talk about, in political science circles, like Ronald Reagan being a realigning president. Like, no, he wasn't. he gave you a competent conservative take on what FDR started and what got ran into the ground by Johnson and Nixon. And not so much Nixon, because Nixon just made mistakes, including Vietnam and things, but
Yeah. Yeah.
Thomas Keller, Uncle Joe, Trans Am, hair metal bands, rolled up T-shirt sleeves with a cigarette pack in them. Bring it all back.
That's so funny.
I do. I love the meme version of Joe Biden. The sunglasses licking the ice cream cone version.
Right.
But
yeah. Or the sunglasses, like, and he's like a vet with a double top kind of thing. Like,
right. But it comes with the party of Moloch being in power, and I'm really good.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No thanks.
The peaceful democratic age has brought more war than the violent age of monarchs. And I mean, some of that has to do with technology, but the wars that the monarchs fought were usually pretty small scale. Usually, it was when the Enlightenment started. They started getting these large scale, like really large scale wars. That that's what I think we're heading towards. Actually, is like, honestly, if I had to guess. Pay attention to the situation with China is all I'll say. Go back and watch my We Were Warned video on Lois Erlmeyer. Go back and watch that one. And that's kind of where I'm placing my bets on at this point. I just don't know. I don't have a time frame.
Yeah, time frame is the hardest thing, and unfortunately. So,
Someone says, but Anthony, all of America's problems came from the hippies in the 60s. Until then, America was paradise. America was already pretty degenerate in the 20s. The Depression and the war put that on hold, and then we got a clean-cut sort of age of degeneracy in the 50s.
Yep.
The birth control and all the rest came from the 50s. Got put into power in the 60s, but the sexual revolution didn't just, people who weren't walking down the street and decide, hey, one day, hey, let's be promiscuous.
And even the greatest gen. I mean, for Pete's sake, look, does anybody remember the concept of flapper? I mean, come on, like
the concept of what? Oh, the flapper,
like the flapper girls, like the Roaring Twenties kind of stuff. I mean, please do not tell me that is not at least a precursor of all this stuff. Come on,
right? The reason we had the production code in Hollywood was because of what was going on in the 20s and 30s.
Sure.
Yeah. So
exactly.
Yeah. Give me some Mad Max blood. No.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
The forgotten generation of the beatniks. Yeah, when were those guys born? Because they were of age in the 50s, but they probably were too young to have fought in the war. So would they have been like the guys who were 17 in 1945? Too young to go to go storm the beaches of Normandy, but too old to probably find themselves in Vietnam later on.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I know, Willis, you're talking about that as neocon with the joke. I know. Willis also says, I really blame America's founders for America's problems, but that is heresy. Well, against what Charles Coulomb calls the American civic religion. Yeah, it would be.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's the Mark Trousseau says the Moloch mills, as I'll call them, are still open. 2,600 done per day, far more than the thing I can't name. Don't even put the name of the thing in the chat, please. It's No, I'm serious. Like YouTube is
No, I know.
like it's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. Like
Yeah,
because there is the creator blog, the YouTube creator blog, where you can go and read announcements if you're a YouTube content creator. Talked about how you can talk about that thing, and as long as you're responsible, you can put videos up without censorship, you can get them monetized and all that. And in practice, that hasn't happened.
yeah, yeah. Everybody, they're not paying attention to this thing, so they set up an algo, they just let it run. They're not gonna.
Elizabeth is right that the thing hasn't peaked yet. It could get much worse. When you have when you have a guy from the party of Moloch like Andrew Cuomo, and then the president who they don't like each other at all, both agreeing that it's coming, that the peak is going to probably be in right around late April, early May. That's the peak that they're projecting. Although, one thing I wanted to bring up with people: how many of you know anybody who was ill, really ill, in December or January, way before anything it broke in the news? Like, and had all the, it looked like a really bad flu. I know a lot of people who did. I've been seeing a lot of reports on this online, and it looks like we may have had this thing in our midst for a while. It just hit a critical mass where people started noticing. So, like, I saw this on Twitter, like various different things. These are all anecdotal, unfortunately, but I'm wondering if, this has really been here for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I did see everybody saying like, "Oh, well, it wasn't," and I was that way. 5 days, and I'm never sick that long with the flu. But here's the thing. I mean, it's pretty well documented we had a pretty bad flu season. So, here's the thing. So in addition to my, economics, expertise, I suppose, is statistical stuff. Most of my professional work is built around sort of applied work and statistics, not theoretical stuff. So look, I'm not an epidemiologist, but epidemiology is absolutely shot through with massive data and inference problems that, as smart as these people are, there is a paradigm in statistics that does not account for some of the problems that we have figured out we have with observational data. And by observational, I mean data that you collect and then you use a regression to basically figure out what the effect of X is on Y. And so, anytime you can get an experiment, and I would say in social science, the problem with these experiments is that they don't generalize, right? So like you can do an experiment, on, risk aversion in a village in Burkina Faso. Okay, well, that doesn't, in the year 2017. Okay, that does not generalize to everything.
Well, can I give you an example of when I became sort of, you could say, red-pilled on social science as a science? It was sitting in a quantitative research methods course in my PhD program, and we were reading outputs from published peer-reviewed studies where it said that they made a claim and said that their research bore out the claim, like it will all say in everything. And then we actually looked at the math, like actually how they did it.
Right.
And the only one that actually bore it out was the famous vitamin C study, where they showed that if you take large amounts of vitamin C when you're not feeling well, your cold symptoms last for X amount of days less. That was the only one. Every single so-called peer-reviewed article that said X happened and here's our math to prove it, the math didn't prove it. Or if it did, it was them really playing with the with the numbers to make it so, like, we need a p-value of 0.1 for this to be okay, and we got one that was 0.25, so that's close enough. I was like, well, hold on. Like, at that point, I was like, I'm never gonna in any serious way call myself a social scientist, like, because that's just it's a house of cards, and it was one of those things that made me very mad too, and made me realize I shouldn't be in academia. Because
here's the thing. But the principles of experiments and stuff like that work very well in the natural sciences, right? At least they're better, right? And so what I keep going back to is why, if this thing is so deadly and so virulent, why did everyone on a cruise ship for like a month, why didn't it wipe out everybody over the age of 60? I just don't get it. I mean, you know what I mean?
Apparently,
It's so weird.
my boss at my side job was really, really ill at that time. And what made me think about this was the fact that I was having a conversation with him the other day, and she said, she kind of thinks she had it already. And she came to work, because she was in a position where she couldn't do any. I mean, she took a couple days off, but that was in December.
Right.
And so now I'm wondering. So I don't know. It's an interesting thought. Well, and somebody asked in the chat, why would they suppress the information on this? It's because this platform really likes authoritative sources. Have you ever noticed if you watch any certain kinds of content, it will go from us to if you let autoplay run, it'll often go to Hoover Institute or mainstream stuff. That's not an accident. And so go watch a Tim Pool video for this as a good example of this. He'll do a video about the thing going on, and all of a sudden, right below it will be a hot link to a institutional authoritative source. We're not even talking a media source. We're talking a government resource for religion or for information.
Yeah. Yep.
Willis, we need to discuss what's really important. Disney killed Star Wars, and Star Trek is bad now. That's why more important than Raven Happy Fun Time, which is code for the thing. Political situation, especially than icky religion. I watch a lot of that angry nerd stuff when I'm because I can't watch too much Catholic commentary stuff because I don't want to sound like everybody else. Although I do watch other stuff, some of the other people sometimes, but.
Right.
Plus, it's entertaining just to watch people be that worked up over things that I used to be really worked up about myself. So it's sort of watching this as a cautionary tale.
Yeah. Nostalgia. Yeah.
Well, that, and it's man, I'm glad I'm not attached to this stuff anymore. Man, this stuff all just became a dumpster fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tim Tool. You mean Tim Pool? Yeah.
Some people call him Pim Tool to make fun of him.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah. I don't agree with a lot of his own personal takes, but at the end of the day, he's not lying to me.
Yeah,
that's
true.
And it's a good idea once in a while to watch things from reasonable people who you don't agree with, because it's just a good idea, just in general.
Mm-hmm.
Pim Tool isn't a very good idea to begin with. Why didn't they shut down spring break and the Florida beaches? Because money. If there's if there's a bad idea in the culture, ask yourself if there's a lot of money involved.
But it's a pretty good quarantine for really, really stupid 20-year-olds,
That's also true.
Just let them all kill each other,
Oh yeah.
Just tell them not to come back anytime soon.
If you want a good idea,
that's heartless.
Someone's got a question. If religion and science are to work in tandem with each other, then how can you state that the closing of mass to the public is a bad idea if the idea is to save lives, not to harm the mass? Well, even in the plague days, they didn't really close the mass. People are saying that that they did, but here's what they didn't have germ theory in those days. So here's what they did: St. Charles Borromeo and a couple others shut down the mass, and then they held mass in the streets.
Right.
That's one thing you're not hearing about. I'm all for
just do it outside. Anything you do outside is probably going to be totally fine, because the second the virus hits sunlight, it's going to killed
in theory.
I mean, yeah. Well, it's airborne and it can survive on plastic, but that's because we have roofs everywhere.
Right. So my thinking is the idea of there is, at the end of the day, the graces that come from the Eucharist and the Mass are things that the public needs right now more than ever. I'm all for dispensations for the dispensations that are very wide-reaching from the bishops to let people who are at risk or work with the at-risk or who might be at risk stay home. And even having more masses, that's what the Polish bishops were doing, and limiting how many people can go to attend to 20 people or whatever. That's fine to me. I just, if I have to choose between the Eucharist or not the Eucharist, I will always choose the Eucharist. Mm-hmm. And now that having been said, the mass part isn't the part that worries me the most. The part that worries me the most is there are enough dioceses in the West right now that have even shut down confession. That is madness. That is utter madness, because it means you're going to have people dying not in a state of grace. And at that point, they're purely at the mercy. They're purely, and I mean purely, at the mercy of God at that point, at their judgment.
Yeah. Yep.
It's and that terrifies me. Spring break apocalypse.
Also, Trump just had a meeting or a press conference, and he's saying that he's not going to allow companies to use the money for stock buybacks, and he's saying that they can give equity an equity to the government for bailouts. I mean, can you say sovereign wealth fund, right?
Yeah, why don't you explain what a sovereign wealth fund is for people, because they might not know what that is.
Yeah, so the whole idea is that like, it's a rainy day fund for the government, but it's just, I mean, I don't know much about it, but we don't really have one. And the whole idea is that the government owns an equity stake in firms, ideally in the country. Not that it owns all of it or whatever, but just that there is a some kind of a wealth component there.
Right. So, if people think that sounds like socialism, technically speaking, the government...
It's corporatism.
It's different. And the government could, right now, under federal law, could dissolve any corporation it really wanted to by revoking its corporate charter. It just hasn't been done in forever. Right.
Yep. Yeah. You have to have something at the end of the system has to have it has to have something on top of it. And look, if you're Catholic, you believe in legitimate authority and you believe in obedience to authority, and you've read Romans. So,
right.
This is not socialism.
And to that end, there is no public masses available in the United States except from the SSPX and then from groups and other sort of questionable groups. And I don't say the SSPX is questionable, just understand what I mean by that. And I am going to obey my bishop and not go to mass on Sunday, partially because I don't have it available. But the other, but the parish near me has confessions, at least as last I checked. And so again, please go to confession if you have access to it before that gets shut down too. And if you don't, and the only option is the SSPX, well, guess what? There can be a priest who got fully laicized, and I mean laicized like McCarrick laicized, and they can still, in emergency circumstances, hear confessions. So, and, Pope Francis gave the SSPX the authority to hear confessions, so there's nothing questionable about going to them for confession. And if you have any questions about that, go watch Marshall's interview with Bishop Schneider, because Schneider was the point guy for the Vatican with dealing with the SSPX, and he's flat out says publicly that they're not in schism. So,
yeah, right.
Let's see. Marge Hayes, so don't panic and think you're going to die. That's correct. Panic, I don't know what anything good comes from, panicking.
Yeah. Nothing does.
Ben asks, wouldn't it be less harmful to the economy and society in general to let the thing run its course? We are acting like it has a 50% rate.
Well, look, here's the thing. The UK is trying that. So if you're looking at any data, go look at the UK's data and see how they're doing, because their strategy is herd immunity. Quarantine the sick and let everybody else go about their day. And the whole idea is that, first of all, you don't completely obliterate your economy, and you also have the benefit of, that everybody who's healthy and gets exposed to it builds immunity. So you build immunity faster, but you don't have time to study it and figure out exactly what's happening before people get infected. So it's a trade-off. And the thing is we're going to get to see, what happens. Hopefully this is not a massive permanent power grab for the federal government that gets thrown into the hands of the Moloch folks in the near future. Right. In the near future.
Right. That's
to me, that's worst case, right?
Right, because they haven't been hiding their authoritarian sort of tendencies lately.
Definitely.
They're nakedly talking about just importing, whole batches of new voters and things, and just giving and just driving the debt up to the point of insanity. I don't think that stuff will play well in the upcoming election. So.
Not at all.
Which is why there's a lot of growing number of people who, if you really look at their policies, they're liberals, but now they're like, well, I don't know what I do now, except I can't vote for the lunatics in the party of Moloch.
But that's where the realignment comes, and that's where.
Right.
And
I try not to use the term left and right much anymore because it doesn't really work.
no,
Because,
no,
I mean, you got the president of the United States is a 1990s Democrat with a bad habit with a habit of entertaining me mightily on Twitter, and when he got a hot mic. But
yeah, right,
you
right, right,
know,
right.
and the
Well, and what's interesting too about this is the opportunity for a narrative shift. And the worst thing, one of the worst things that can happen is we don't properly take advantage of this potential for a narrative shift by using left-wing terms for the stuff, right? So stop saying, Trump's a progressive. Stop saying, Trump is going left on economics. Stop. That is not helping us with this narrative shift. To shift the narrative, we need to be smart about this, and we need to use the right terms to make this stick.
Mm-hmm. And we're getting into a place where maybe 20 years from now, when we talk about left and right, it will have no analog to the political situation that we've been used to from basically the last presidency back to World War II, and that's totally fine.
Yep.
Somebody asked if I can do a profile on Father Gruner. I might. I have his book, Fatima Priest, and it has an introduction written by Malachi Martin. So I want to record that and put it on my channel, but I don't know if I can because of the copyright. It's the only problem.
Right.
But I might do one on Father Gruner because he was an interesting fellow.
Yeah.
Taiwan is Star Trek: The Next Generation. I don't get the joke, but that's okay.
Taiwan. Yeah, I mean, I think that was like one of the. I mean, maybe. Well, no, never mind. I'm not thinking of the right thing.
The head epidemiologist in Connecticut told us most people never know they have the thing because the symptoms are mild. Mild symptoms never get tested. That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Trump used to support the Clintons. Yeah. Sovereign wealth funds are like family offices, but for royalty, royal families, and kingdoms. Will says terminology is important. Atheists use it to win debates. Atheism is no longer a belief that needs defending. It's a lack of belief, and they don't need to prove anything. That's what they say, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Atheists are also free thinkers as opposed to delusional and brainwashed religious. I sense the sarcasm you're using there, yes. But yeah, terminology is important. It's why, like, I sometimes cringe when I see how people talk about these things on social media. Inflammatory language has its uses sometimes, but at the end of the day, sounding like a mirror of like the fringe left never helps us either.
Right. Yeah. That's totally true.
Star Trek: The Next Generation made 47 an in-joke. Loads of things came in 47 on that show. Oh, okay. I haven't watched much Next Generation. My wife and I started watching Deep Space Nine recently. And, as usual, I always find myself liking the villainous or the unsavory characters in a show. So, I look at Quark and I go, that guy's awesome. Reprehensible, but highly entertaining.
Right.
Yeah, wasn't it in 2000 or 2004 that the now president ran for president briefly in the Reform Party?
I don't know.
Does the thing live in a hot climate? Well, it's in Africa now, and it's South America. It's on every continent. Let's see, Patrick Green, as a former atheist, I can confirm you said the crap. Yeah. It's summer in Peru, and they are in lockdown. So, yeah, I mean, it's everywhere. I remember about a month and a half ago, people believing that it largely only affected people of Asian descent and would die in warm weather. And now we're questioning all that. So we'll see what happens with things.
Yep.
Bad guy respecter. My favorite character in Star Wars is the Emperor. So
yeah, no kidding.
Like, people are like, why do you like the prequels? Well, if you watch them as the triumph of Palpatine, they're actually not bad movies.
Yeah. Right.
Ben says Father Gruner was the reason for your conversion. That's good. That's good. Lots of good little short videos on Father Gruner on YouTube, worth watching. Although one of the most ironic ones was right after Francis was elected, and him like standing there in St. Peter's Square expressing hope about him being the priest or the pope who would do the consecration to Russia, and be a great traditionalist pope. It's like in hindsight, it's almost cringe-inducing to watch that. In that same way that I'm sure that a lot of people on the left go back and watch people talking about with hope about Barack Obama being the guy who would bring national health care and usher in an age of progressive peace, and the guy who did the things he did in Libya. So
right, yeah, exactly.
Anthony has a bad time breathing. Am I okay? Yeah, I'm fine. I don't have a bad time breathing.
Yeah, no, I think you're sound fine.
Yeah. As a responsible employer, all my staff are in 2-week quarantine. Productivity is through the roof since nobody can leave the office. That's pretty funny. Wills, I know how that movie ended. I have refused to watch it. I'll rent it. The reason I refused to watch it was as soon as I found out they're bringing him back as anything other than, a plot device. So,
yeah,
I don't have. To me, what Disney's done with that franchise is one of those things that made me glad that one of the fruits of me begging God to change, to correct what's wrong in my life was breaking my attachment to those things, because what Disney has done to that franchise. Like I watched Solo once, we rented it, and I sat there going, well, this is an awful movie.
Yeah, right.
The Last Jedi is historically a bad movie, but Russia is consecrated and I am the Pope. No, you're not. All right, so if there's no other questions, I think we're going to call it here. We've done this for almost 2 hours, which is great. So I put in the chat a couple times where they can find you. Why don't you say the name of your channel again? And
yeah, so just check out the Trad Dads podcast. It's on any podcast platform. I'm also on YouTube. If you want to talk to me directly, you can go to anchor.fm/TradDads. Or I have a Facebook page, and I have a Twitter account at TradDads.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, and
thanks
for tuning in, guys. It was great. So I'm going to try to stream about once a week if I can. And if you're a member of the channel or you support the channel through Patreon or whatever, I will also be periodically doing supporter-only streams. So, those are options. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys, and have a nice weekend.